Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be back in action and live again. We are loading up the season finale of Build a Beast. For those of you that are new, joining this final piece of the journey, I've been sharing an elite coaching experience I've been going through over the weeks, sharing it with you guys week after week, getting into the nitty gritty details. And today we are capping that experience with the DNA and epigenetics of my existence. That's what we're going to be tapping into today. And it's fitting the premise of our expertise of essentially mastering the energy equation. So that's what we're going to be going over today, is how to look at pieces of your DNA, how to analyze it, and look into your personal epigenetics and see what does that mean for the decisions I need to make day to day. So thank you guys for joining. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Drop a quick little comment in the chat if you're hanging with us. But welcome to the season finale of Build a Beast. Let's bring in our star coach of the season. You have been watching him throughout the weeks and sharing the journey with me. So thank you guys so much for joining the party. And please welcome Justin Roethlingshoefer.
How are you, my man?
Yo, I am doing good. I'm in this contrasting state of this has been an amazing journey, an amazing experience, but it's also the last episode, so I'm a little sad, but mostly excited, just because this has been so brilliant. I'm excited to take the entire journey that we've had over the weeks, and taking a look at things from that perspective as well, and being able to kind of share that experience with everybody. So, yeah, all is well in my world, brother.
I love it. And that's the big thing about this, right? It's like, it doesn't end here. It's something that now you're armed with certain information, certain understanding, and to be able to apply. It's like that so what to everything that we're always talking about. Hey, how do I get more sleep? How do I eat better? How do I hydrate better? Instead of now just going and randomly taking something off of an influencer off the internet, or seeing a new trend come out and saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and this is going to be my end all be all. We now have a guided framework as to running life off of your own data, running life off of something that means something to you and nobody else. Because when we start to do that, it now is working off of our DNA, off of our epigenetics, off of our HRV data, all of these numbers and metrics that before we would have been like spinning in circles going, oh my God, I don't know what's happening. I'm not seeing any correlation to this, but now we have the information. We understand the information. We can apply the proper action steps, and we can start to see the changes we're really truly wanting at the level in which we're looking to do it in. And so that's what I'm kind of excited about for you, is to kind of see you continue on this trend, continue on this journey. And that's quite often what we've seen. I mean, as we're filming this, we haven't met for 2 weeks. The guy got sick with COVID, and was just running me through the mill. But even when I look at your data, you've been able to maintain a lot of this stuff across the way. I think your Whoop band died, or it was off, or something happened.
Vacay. I had my own little vacay, and then it died on vacation. I was like, oh, didn't account for that one.
That's right. So, but even still, like, your trend from where we started to where we are now, your average HRV went from 27 when we started to 42 when we're ending. And this has been over a 3-month process. And so for people that think, hey, I'm going to drink half my body weight in ounces this week, and you see a 1 HRV increase in average over that week, and they're like, this doesn't work. What's going on? No. And I remember I started with this quote is talent gets you noticed, but consistency gets you paid. And it's the same concept in anything. It doesn't matter what your talent is. It doesn't matter what your payment is. Talent will get you noticed. Consistency will get you paid every single day. But it's making sure that you're consistent in which things those are to accomplish that ultimately goal that you're looking for. So that's the big concept here. And so when we take a look and we talk about DNA is something that has been, again, a big craze, a big fad. And what we've seen from a lot of people in this space and a lot of companies in this space is it gets into like this ethical, moral dilemma oftentimes, is because a lot of companies are using this pseudoscience or potentially even quality science, but they're using it to now drive their own supplement line, or they're using it to drive their own meal prep line, or they're using it to drive their own clothing line, or their bedding or pillows, or whatever it may be, instead of actually purposefully being able to apply it to something that we're going to go through with you today and really deep dive into, hey, these are the action steps from the 8 controllables that we've been talking about over the last, call it 12 weeks, and now being able to drive those controllables and tweak them so that they're even more specific to you across the whole board. So let me pull up your results here, Travis.
Perfect.
And so when we start diving in and we really look at this, okay, so this is the summary of the DNA results from the physical side. So muscle power, gifted, muscle stamina above normal, O2 usage normal, anaerobic threshold normal. Big thing we see here, okay, so if Travis wants to create massive change within his body, if he all of a sudden went and did a 45-minute Peloton ride or a 2-mile run and some HIIT training, Travis would not see the changes for the energy he's investing. Why? His O2 utilization, it's just okay. It's just average. Like it's good, but he's never going to really see the changes physically that he's looking for if he continues to run, bike, and lift submaximal weight. Now, if we changed and we trained him explosively, maybe with some heavy kettlebell work or some power snatches, some cleans, some Olympic barbell lifting, some heavy squats, some tempo work, all of a sudden Travis would start to see massive gains in that muscular power area because his body is genetically gifted to create that. So now if we also look at the sports Travis is good at, it's probably things like soccer. It's probably things like track and field 100-meter sprint, something with lots of jumping, something that is power focused. It's not going to be your long distance running. It's not going to be your long duration intervals. It's going to be things of that.
Hell no.
And so when we look at this, that is how we can now start to train. And so the exercise we are doing should also accompany that. And so no different than you. If you're trying to lose weight and you've been Peloton riding for 45 minutes, an hour and a half a day, and you can only drop 1 to 2 pounds over 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and you feel exhausted because you're just putting in the time and burning the calories, it probably comes back to our DNA physical results when we look and say, hey, we're not moving, we're not exercising, which is one of the pillars, according to, or it's one of the controllables, we're not moving, exercising according to our DNA and what our body's asking for. So it makes a lot of sense. Now, when we come down here, very, very interesting, where we take a look at your recovery rate, which is extremely fast, and your soft tissue inflammation response, which is low. This is really great, but it's also a curse at the same time. Reason being is when you do exercise, when you run, when you lift, when you do these types of things, it's not going to create a lot of inflammation within your body. Thus, we're also going to see your recovery rate from these types of things be extremely fast. Your muscle repair, your cardiovascular repair, your HRV response is going to be really quick, which is good. And if I go down to the bottom, to the very last page, which obviously get to last. Oh, can't preview. That's wrong. We'll just reload this page. Beauties of going live. But when we take a look at this, it's going to show us that, and I'm excited to see the correlation here, because the likelihood that we see muscular pain tolerance is going to be very high as well. So we come down to this last part. Perfect. So exercise-induced muscle pain and stress-related muscle pain is in this normal category. So it's a little bit lower than I actually thought I would expect to see, but it's not where I see the majority of people, which is exercise-induced muscle pain. I usually see it as a heightened and elevated risk. And same thing with stress-related. So the fact that we recover faster, we have a lower inflammatory response, and we have a normal exercise-induced and stress-related muscle pain aspect means that we're going to be able to just continue on the way that we normally feel without ever having to focus on recovery, with ever having to focus on our yoga, our soft tissue work, our stretching, those types of things, because they're not something that, oh man, I've got a sore hamstring, I've got a sore hip, or my back is sore from doing all those rows, or I was swinging a baseball bat and my core is sore from rotating, I need to do something. No, you won't get those nods and prompts. So for us, it becomes really, really important that we daily put that self-care routine in, and maybe make it a part of our parasympathetic buffet at night, so that it's now routine, because it's not going to be told to us by a bodily response, because our recovery rate is so fast and our soft tissue inflammation is so low. So that's a big thing that stood out to me there. Everything else, normal is overall rate. So exercise effect on weight, again, you're going to have a normal response. It's going to respond, but we need to be doing what is correct for you. Power to weight ratio, expected that to be high, especially because we're so gifted on that power side. Any questions with that, or does that
No, this was one of my favorite things is seeing my own like intuition and stuff I've thought or felt for a long time come to be verified or validated with data. And so many of those pieces made sense. Like when I played hockey, it was always about like quick, explosive shifts. It was never the long-term endurance. Hated all long-term running, loved sprinting. So seeing all of that is brilliant. There was a decent amount that I admit I had no idea what it means or what to do with it. But on a whole, no, loved this, man.
So now when we get into the diet side, now this becomes something, again, it goes back to, remember, our 3-2-1-0 rule. So 3 meals a day, 2 pieces of fruit a day, ultimately 1 big salad a day, and 0 serving sizes over. Well, now we get to tweak this down. We get to hone it in a little bit more. What should those 3 meals consist of? Protein, carbohydrates, and fats, along with vegetables. We look at this. Carbohydrate response, normal. Your saturated fats response is different than your unsaturated fat response. Saturated fats is like things that are solid at room temperature. So your animal fats, your butters, your creams, these types of things. Your body responds really poorly. So, and again, when we go down and we start to look at your cholesterol levels and your dietary long-term diseases, potential issues, these are where these become so key and important to dial in on early in our life to be able to prevent those things long-term, prevent cardiovascular disease, prevent high cholesterol, prevent high blood pressure, all of these things. So saturated fats, we should eliminate all red meat from our diet simply because we have such a poor response. So chicken, fish, tuna, turkey, pork loin, all of these phenomenal choices of meat for you, but we should stay away from our butters, our red meats, our heavy creams. These types of things we should stay away from. Conversely, where our unsaturated fats have a major benefit, but a lot of people I see don't have this. So your omega-3s, your fish oils, your olive oils, your nuts, your seeds, all of those things, major benefit. And so that's where we want to get our fats throughout the day. So when we're talking about the 3-2-1 rule and having our serving sizes, we want to make sure that our fats in our meals aren't coming from our animal fats and the saturated fats. We want to make sure they're coming from your unsaturated fats, like your dressings, your oils, your nuts, your seeds that you're adding to these things.
David is asking about what about soy? Where does that plug into? Is that part of this equation?
Yeah, so soy will actually get down to a little bit later in the bottom, but we'll be able to understand, especially in males, we need to be careful with soy because soy actually decreases the testosterone release within the body and can actually be very negative for males long term as a protein source. So if we come down to you and we take a look at where it says testosterone decrease over time, I'd love, again, and I'll show you this right here, where we can actually start to see your, and again, the beauty of it, so testosterone and aging. So it's a normal decline. So when we see that, soy would be something that I wouldn't say, hey, Travis, I don't want you to have whatsoever, but it's something we should use sparingly. So soy milk, soy itself, anything soy derived, soy protein, let's really try to limit it, but it's okay if we have it. Somebody that has a slightly faster decline, we would say, hey, you know what? Like any soy products, stay away from 110% because it's going to only accelerate the testosterone process of deceleration as well as accelerate the aging process. Again, conversely, the other way, a slower decline, yeah, use it if it's something that you like. So for you, it would be something that we would want to use sparingly and not something that we would want to tap into all the time.
Cool.
Now, when we come and take a look here at your protein responses, being good, knowing that, hey, we now know that we need to have those white meats, lean meats as our protein response. When we look at sugar response, it's normal, which is great. So these aren't your fruit sugars. These are the artificial sugars that are being placed in your body. And I'm not surprised that we see this because when we go down to the bottom and we look at your type 2 diabetes response and the likelihood of that risk, it's minimized as well. So I'm not surprised to see this or your overeating of sweet foods. Now, bitter taste, why is this important? Because you're likely going to like kale, broccoli, spinach, and have a better affinity for these types of foods, which have a higher concentration of folate, vitamin B, and these things that we'll see down below. When we get into your metabolic rate and we start to see the normal metabolism in which they happen, by deviating anywhere from these areas, we are going to slow that metabolic rate. And so when we see your yo-yo diet response, that could be intermittent fasting, that could be binging and then purging, that could be having a big, massive calorie restriction diet and then going and just fading off and doing whatever we want. It's going to be negative to your health, which means we're going to have a decreased metabolic rate, an increase of fat storage, and ultimately it's going to really hurt us in the long run for being able to maintain our health long term. And then this lactase persistence, again, normal lactase persistence. So what's going to happen is, again, we don't say that you're lactose intolerant, but what we would say is the lactase enzymes within your body are going to slowly start losing their potency and their ability to break down lactase, which is the sugar from milk products, as you age. So 10 years from now, you may notice you have more of a bubbly gut than and something that causes more inflammation internally than you do today. Same thing today, you may notice that happens more often when you eat certain types of dairy products than it did 10 years ago. And so by having that, it's going to start to bring awareness that we should start limiting the amount of dairy products that we are associating within ourselves.
Interesting. Yeah, that's thankfully I do most of that. That's another one that I've kind of naturally avoided in most cases. I don't pursue it as nearly as much as the people around me. Yep. We did have a couple questions. Some I think are just trolling. Others are serious. Sure. Kirsten is asking, why is phytoestrogen Bad if it lowers cancer risk. I guess I don't know the context of when this snuck in, maybe when we were talking about soy. But is this something to consider in this equation? Or is this different per person?
So again, I always tend to stay away from bad, good, never always statements, because again, it's different for every person. And so when we're talking about phytoestrogen, it has this major play on certain aspects that will be good for, again, is better for females versus converse for males. Again, because it all depends on the person. And if we start to combat and create, we have to remember testosterone, estrogen are what? They're hormones. So when we start playing with hormones, melatonin, tryptophan, testosterone, estrogen, it creates this system imbalance within our body. And I love giving this example or this analogy. So when your system is working, there's over 10,000 processes that are happening every minute within the body. I mean, it's absolutely massive. And so think about this for a second. If there's a process that isn't working, what's the number one goal of our body? To keep us alive. That's it. And so it's going to start to steal from Peter to pay Paul to make sure that the processes continue to occur. So when we start stealing from different places and start doing different things, and it doesn't all facilitate in the right direction, well, those processes and those systems are going to be overloaded in one area. Yeah. And it comes back to understanding what the base value of our pyramid is, to bring it back to something that's truly powerful and truly purposeful for you to create that system in a better note.
Interesting. Brilliant. Cool.
So coming back to this, we now take a look at what your nutrient deficiency risk is. And the reason I love looking at it from both a biomarker through the blood as well as a DNA test is for two reasons. One, a biomarker in the blood is just a split moment in time, whereas DNA is what you are what you are genetically predisposed to being deficient in. So if we look here, you're actually really good. And this is where I would want to get a blood test to say, hey, where can we level up? But knowing that selenium deficiency is a massive increased risk for you, as well as an omega-3 benefit. So instead of having somebody say, hey, Travis, you should take bee pollen, you should take turmeric every morning, you should take this, we should biohack your way through it. I'm going to say, hey, Travis, let's save the $300 a month. And let's go buy, again, something I've become a really big fan of. It's called Ritual Multivitamin for men and women, basically a live pill that contains some of the things that you're looking for. So selenium deficiency, great. Let's make sure we're supplementing selenium. And we already know omega-3s are benefit to us because we go up to how our body processes unsaturated fats, and they're a major benefit as well. So we should already be taking an omega-3 multivitamin. Now we take a look at what we're taking post-workout so that we're getting the best bang for our buck as well. To recover, because remember, our body doesn't show major inflammatory responses, and it also recovers very quickly. What can we do to enhance that? Well, we want to go with BCAAs after we work out. We also want to go with glutamine after we work out. Creatine, beta-alanine, and arginine, unnecessary. Pre-workouts, unnecessary. Only thing we need to utilize, BCAAs, glutamine, post-workout, and a multivitamin, and you're set. All of a sudden, you're spending $25 a month on your supplementation process instead of all the other stuff that everyone's going to say we need to biohack our way through.
Brilliant. I very much approve of that theory, especially if it costs less.
Totally. And it's wild how this whole thing happens. Now, when we come down here and we look at this, like I said, genetic type 2 diabetes, we don't see an elevated risk, which I didn't expect because of the way in which your body processes sugars and come up here, your body processes your sugars and your overeating sweet foods likelihood. So I'm not surprised to see this whatsoever. Now, when we come and take a look at genetic bone mineral density. Not surprised either, because you have a predisposition for power and strength. Okay. Now, one thing that stands out here, and we go back to the session that we did on immune function, where if we see a 3-day decrease in HRV, remember we talked about the potion that we create on that 3-day decrease, where we were talking about echinacea, vitamin C, zinc, and oil of oregano. So those 4 things, if we saw that 3-day decrease, that's what we would choose. Now that we see this, you have an increased risk of genetic infection, colds, and flus. This becomes even more important for immune function support.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What do we need? Well, if we go down to immunity, down here, we'll start to see, hey, your immune function has a good response. Thus, this means if we take things at the appropriate time, we are going to see that when we decrease 3 days in HRV and we take these things, our body's going to respond, and we're going to have a solid immune function base. So that means selenium, vitamin E, vitamin C should be the 3 things that we add into our cocktail that we're taking on top of echinacea and oil of oregano. So those are 3 things that, boom, we know we need to add, we need to take, they need to be a part of it. No guessing, no question, no other BS. It's right here. It's being said that that is what we need in order for our body to respond in a positive way.
Brilliant.
Again, eliminating the questions, eliminating the BS guru stuff that's just talked about in terms of generic biohacking along the way, knowing that we have an increased risk of cold and flus. We come in here to stress. This was really, really interesting, and it doesn't surprise me based off what we've seen in your HRV data over the last little bit. Where we see stress and pressure, you have an increased response, and ultimately, we have a massive increase in stress leading to physical symptoms, such as breakdown, such as cardiovascular disease, such as long-term chronic illnesses. These are all things that it's telling us that our body is going to have. So when we go into our pillar of self-care and stress management, remember what we talked about, giving yourself time to create that parasympathetic buffet. How are you giving yourself intermittent breaks throughout the day? What are you doing for only yourself? What are you focused on? And for you, Travis, we now know, because your stress leads to physical symptoms, this has to be a number 1 priority. Where's your energy in? Where's your energy out? Where are they going? And how do we continue to optimize them for you? Because if we don't, and we just forget about it, when you're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, maybe we're having a heart attack. Maybe we're having we've got some type of breakdown. We've got some type of chronic illness that comes up, whether it be cardiovascular disease, cancers, because our body has just had a hard time dealing with all the stress we're under. Or we figure out within my career, within things that I'm doing, how can I reduce some of this stress and ultimately take some of the pressure off my body? And so that, again, we're starting to see how this DNA test is not just some random, hey, here, now buy my supplements, but rather giving you more specific action steps and more focused points to those 8 controllables that we've been talking about the last 12 weeks.
And I think Jackie's jumping in here with, I believe this is related to all the stress stuff. At least that's most often where I hear cortisol attached to this. She's asking, is cortisol part of this equation or these measurements? Is that maybe the physical stress responses? Or
I love seeing that, because cortisol has been given a bad rap for no specific purpose. Cortisol is necessary in the body. We need cortisol, because without cortisol, none of us have energy to do anything. And we talked about this in our sleep component. If you go back to sleep, where back to that sleep one that you and I did, melatonin and cortisol are opposing of one another. So all of a sudden, if cortisol is high, melatonin has to be low. If melatonin is high, cortisol has to be low. So that comes back ultimately to our circadian rhythm. And cortisol has to be high in the morning. If it's not high, if our rhythm is out of whack, we will wake up fatigued. Again, if we're not utilizing our circadian rhythm correctly, and we're not engaging in it in the right way, cortisol won't be high in the morning because melatonin will still be present. And so it's this ratio we need to work with. And that's why cortisol is not so much focused on, hey, it's a bad thing. No, cortisol is necessary. But being too heavy in that stress space all the time will create an imbalance in that. And that's why, again, cortisol will continue to keep this cycle going. Why? If you're continually living in stress, if you have not managed your stress well, and ultimately for you, it becomes even more important because we're looking at it and we see that it has that greater impact on physical symptoms. So your body's going to start releasing a greater cortisol response from the stress that's happening there. If we don't combat it with some type of stress management system, then all of a sudden what will happen is there's no way to decrease it. It will stay chronically elevated. And what will happen is because cortisol is chronically elevated, melatonin will be chronically depleted. And thus it will start to affect your sleep. And what do we know about sleep? Sleep is the number one factor that allows us to reset our body. It's the number one factor that proves for long-term longevity. And if we're unable to sleep, it is a cause of massive strain and stress on the body, which continues to produce what? More cortisol. So we can see how cortisol does get the bad rap, but it's not the cortisol that's the issue. It's coming back to the purpose of how we're using it and the habits in which we're engaging in that ultimately create that. So Jackie, I hope that helps. And that's why, again, cortisol is not the bad thing. It's the habits and things we're engaged in that will continue to create that for us.
Love it. No, this is all brilliant insights. It looks like we got a few people getting nerdy with us. David on board with everything's mentioning this cortisol as an example of the biphasic response. This sounds like your nerdy world of everything, but I'm glad people know more about this than I do. But that's exactly what we're here for. So if you guys have any questions or comments throughout this, feel free to jump in here. I know Nick earlier, Ronan Janitor, will probably be following up. He wants to get his DNA set up for getting back to fighting weight to see what his optimal game plan is. So thanks to everybody that's been joining us both on LinkedIn and on Twitch. Appreciate y'all being a part of this adventure.
And so as we go back to this, Travis, it really comes back to, okay, what are our action steps? What do we take away from this? And so again, one of our controllables was understanding, hey, where does it come to play with that stress management, stress optimization, and it becomes a key priority for you. We need to focus on that pillar and make sure that this happens. Even going back to when we talk about sleep, we need to make sure we're hitting that 3-2-1 rule for you and diving deep into that that buffet deep at night, so that ultimately we can allow ourselves to engage in that parasympathetic response within the body, to allow us to come back down, allow us to get into that stage of sleep that will, again, help us long term. And we'll see that down here a little bit further, right in this area of sleep, where you're not likely to be that night owl, that person that stays up late at night. You're not likely to have narcolepsy or fragmented sleep, but we come here. Stress affects sleep, very likely. So we see that this stress affects sleep compared to how stress leads to physical symptoms. You can now understand why that, again, our controllable of sleep, the 3-2-1-0 rule, 3 hours before bed, no more meals, 2 hours before bed, no more work, no more problem solving, 1 hour before bed, no more blue light. And that's the moment we activate the parasympathetic buffet. It's put in place for a reason. And this becomes something that for you is paramount. It's like, it's a non-negotiable, because we now know that stress affects sleep. And then we go with what Jackie was talking about. Well, if you're chronically stressed, if you're chronically living in that sympathetic state and chronically having to deal with that cortisol response from the body, you're going to have that decreased melatonin effect simply because you haven't dialed in your night routine and you've just overstressed yourself chronically for a week, a month, a year. And now you're tired and wired. That's what we call people in this space. You wake up tired, you go to bed wired, And it's this reverse, this reverse effect and the reverse circadian rhythm effect that we start to find in people. So this becomes something that is a non-negotiable for you and becomes like number one on the priority list. So when we come in here and look at like our aging process now, with a physical decline with age, we see that we have a slightly faster decline. Well, great. We're predisposed to declining faster in our overall age, our bone density, our ability to be strong and everything else. Well, if we actually focus back on our strength and power, and that becomes a part of our routine, that is going to minimize this risk. So again, what action step becomes extremely powerful for you? Our exercise and movement controllables. Mm-hmm. And specifically focused on strength and power. If we do this, we can now minimize this risk and ultimately slow that. The good thing is if we look at your bone strength, that's a slower decline. So if we actually utilize the ages of, call it 25 to 40 in males, where we can optimize our muscle growth, our bone density growth, stimulation, all of those things that are going to help us, when this now age category starts to come in, the fact that we have a slower decline of bone strength will actually, again, help work against that physical decline with age. So it adds to that motivating factor of, oh, you know what, I'll work out later. No, I'm going to work out now. It's going to become a key priority as a part of my routine because genetically I need to step up because that's what I need. We've got clients that all of a sudden physical decline with age, extremely slow. So they can work out 3 days a week and feel great, and they can do that until they're 90 years old just because they do have a slow physical decline with age. That's just them. And then we have other clients who have an extremely fast decline with age. We've worked on over 10 years. Maybe the guy was 65 when he started with us. He's now 75. Guy's more active, more physically fit now than he was at 65 simply because he helped slow down this aging process because of diving into the DNA concepts of how physical movement, activity, sleep, nutrition, hydration all come down for him. So it's using this data in a really applicable way and using the information to apply it to our life to ultimately create the ultimate changes we're looking for. Now, when we look here at your injury risk, okay, so Achilles tendinopathy. So what I would, and your knee risk injury potentiation, what I would say here is we want to engage in cardiovascular work, strength work that is non-impact. So a lot of swimming, a lot of biking, a lot of rollerblading, ice hockey, climbing stairs, hiking at a heavy incline. We want to eliminate long distance running. We want to eliminate heavy wind sprints, all these types of things. Why? And it goes back to how our body's predisposed in terms of our physical output. We know that those things our body don't respond to already. So if all of a sudden we look at it and our body has a negative physical aspect and an injury risk to it, look how those two things now come together and they formulate something that ultimately helps enhance our decisions as to what to engage in. This is another big one, and this comes back to the mindset piece, where again, another controllable. There's some overlap here in self-care. There's some overlap here in sleep. There's some overlap here in mindset. And let's start down right here at workaholic. So when it says probable workaholic, this is just the fact that you probably have addictive behaviors.
Guilty.
So it's the awareness of that. And let's start pairing this together. If we have a addictive behavior and we now compare it, and we also have a massive issue with stress management, if we don't understand that and just say, hey, and acknowledge it and build a plan around it, such as, again, maybe it's going for a walk every 2 hours. Maybe it's, again, engaging in the 3-2-1 rule at night. Maybe it's making sure that in the middle of the day, we have an hour block where we go and work out and break up our day. Whatever it may be, that becomes super key in ensuring that we can now work against the way that we're genetically predispositioned. Same thing down here, night productivity, zero night productivity. So we should have, again, that 3-2-1 rule should be a non-negotiable for us. we're not going to be doing work at night. So we can shut off at 6:30 p.m. and then really have a massively impactful objectivity to how we work and how we push forward and set ourselves up based upon that genetic profile. Conversely, knowing that, hey, we're going to wake up at a consistent time and get our most important things done first, because that is when we are in our primed work state. Now, same thing with warrior versus warrior. So that warrior aspect, warrior gene, is something that always thinking about the future, that mindset. It's a little bit, you're predisposed to having that scarcity mindset rather than a abundance mindset. Does that mean that you don't have one? No.
Yeah.
That means that you're predisposed to being more worried about what's happening rather than taking action and living presently. So it takes us back to the concept of, hey, my self-care routines, my meditation, my breath work, my being present in the moment, my continual work on the mindset space of everything that Elise talked to you about, level 1 through 7 energy, needs to be so leveled up in the awareness side, because I have a tendency to want to spend time in that 1, 2, and 3 area. Which is exactly what we saw in your results as well. We come down here to gut health, same thing. The reason why, again, this has a major impact on sleep. Our gut has over 400 times more melatonin in our gut than is produced by our pineal gland in our brain. So if we have inflammatory things going on in our gut, it's going to, again, cause not as much melatonin to be released. If we're combining that now with a high stress level, which creates high cortisol and a reduced melatonin availability anyways, it's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for sleep deprivation. It's a recipe for insomnia, all of these things that come about that really create tough situations for us to flourish and perform in. So for you, your gluten intolerance, again, mild risk. So let's just make sure that we're minimizing our gluten intake. It doesn't mean that we go gluten-free. It doesn't mean we have to hop on that bandwagon, but we just are more aware of it. We're not going to go and have breadsticks with pasta and white sauce with a beer. Like, that's just gluten overload. That's not going to put us in any state to succeed and have a good night's sleep and see some optimal performance levels in that area. Gum health, the big thing, increased risk here. So just make sure you go to the dentist regularly, that becomes a part of your routine. It's something that you truly are impacting and wanting to know. And then again, we come back to this stress side. We already know stress affects you in a physical way very heavily. And we know that stress now will affect your gut and the way you digest food, the way you process food, the way you absorb nutrients. So knowing that, we also need to focus heavily on that stress management. And then caffeine and gut health. Caffeine, you had a great response to, which we would put a curfew on at noon, because again, remember, we want to make sure that it's not impacting our sleep, because caffeine has a half-life in our body of about 8 hours for you. So if you stop taking a 200 milligram coffee at noon, that means by 8 p.m. you'll still have 100 active in your body. But because, again, we go here, caffeine and gut health, not impacted. We go up here to sleep, and caffeine doesn't affect sleep, means we can probably operate pretty well. And there also was a benefit to caffeine and focus. So knowing that we can use it in a way to really optimize the way in which we are showing up, be it for a presentation, be it for some high quality work we need, but using it purposefully. We come down to this one right here. And again, cardiovascular health issues, we see this increased risk. So we go back to it, and knowing, back to our exercise, back to our nutrition, hey, cardiovascular health, that is why we want to eliminate the red meat and the saturated fats, because we already have an increased risk of cardiovascular health issues. We also want to make sure that we are not having that with our strength and power work, that is also going to increase our likelihood of decreasing our cardiovascular risk. So no cholesterol issues, which is great. Salt, high blood pressure, all looks normal. So again, this, even though it's normal, could be elevated in you if we did not change the way we ate through our saturated fats. Why? Because our body doesn't like them, and all of a sudden that could cause issues here. So that is the how all of these pieces start to come together. We don't see them singularly. We see them in a holistic nature. The immune function, we already went over that, and that had to do with the immunity controllable. We talked about the 3 decrease in HRV, and now we're just adding that vitamin E, vitamin C, selenium to that cocktail that we're taking when we see that 3D decrease. Eye health, again, really, really important here. You have a slight degeneration with age, but we have an increased risk of open eye glaucoma, a decreased conversion of beta carotene, and an increased deficiency in eye health and vitamin B deficiency. So we look at this. Well, if we can optimize and take in vitamin B in our daily multivitamin, which we saw we had an increased risk of above, that's going to ultimately increase the conversion of beta carotene, which is going to decrease open eye glaucoma. But what this shows us is, number one, hey, we should also have it should be imperative that we're seeing our eye doctor and our optometrist at least once or twice a year, and making sure that they know of this stuff, so it's something they can now look for and watch for, so that if they see an early sign, it's not, it might be, no, he's predisposed to this, we should make sure that we're acting on it now, so that at 45, 55, 65, we're not wearing bottle caps as glasses, and we can have some type of early, we can have some type of, or we have eye issues, where we can have some type of early preventative care being made.
Yep. These are all aligned, so aligned with my world. Before we stray too far away from it, Teresa snuck in here with a question. I'm assuming around the gluten tolerance section. Do you think someone can overcome celiacs, or is this something that just needs to be addressed and managed head on, or is there some kind of hope for Teresa to have some OG cake?
So when we're talking about celiac disease, we're talking about diabetes, we're talking about all these things. Remember, it goes back to processes within the body, and I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, you can reverse all these things, but a lot of times, if we go back to processes, we're just treating things with medicine. We're just treating things with, hey, stay away from X, Y, or Z. But there's something foundationally and fundamentally wrong with the way our body is working, the way our body is processing things. So if we go back to the key concepts of what we're truly focusing on, celiacs within gluten, if we can now start going back to, hey, what's our gut flora look like? What's the contents of our micronutrient deficiencies? How are we sleeping? What's our stress management levels? What's the natural inflammatory properties that we can decrease internally? It comes back to what kind of carbohydrates are we eating? Are they of high quality? All of these things are questions that we now can start to have better answers for. Remember, data. Quality data. Let me back up. Quality data allows us to ask quality questions, better questions that ultimately we can start to get better answers for. Because up until certain things, it's just garbage. Garbage in is garbage out. And if we don't have this information, we're just going off of what we're being told. Oh, you're a celiac, you can never have gluten again, stay away from it. Well, now I'm going to go eat gluten-free pasta that's artificially made, that is, a lot of stuff is one step away from plastic, and that's supposed to be better for me. No, we can go and we can start to move away from a lot of these terms as long as we start to align and eat based upon our genes, sleep based upon our genes, exercise based upon our genes, recover based upon our genes, stress manage based upon our genes, self-care, mindset, all the 8 controllables we talked about, we bring it back to our genes. And what ultimately will be the result at the end of the day? An increase in HRV, an increased trend that shows that our body is how our body's dealing with mental, spiritual, physical, emotional stress. And that's how this all comes together at the end of the day. And it's amazing to see the path that we start to create with this. Now, if we come down and we take last thing, it's really looking at your skin health and dermal sensitivity. And you have high sensitivity, so we want to make sure that, hey, you are getting you're wearing sunscreen when you go outside. That's the biggest thing that
Yeah.
when you're outside, you have to wear that because, again, decrease that level of potential for skin cancer and whatnot. And then our myostatin related variants, you have potential, which is great, which ultimately comes back to, I'm not surprised, because of our heightened and elevated gene for muscle power and strength. And what myostatin related performance is all based off power and muscle sports. So things like lacrosse, hockey, soccer, not surprised that those are where you flourish, because that's what we see there as well. And that's and like I said, then everything else within our information here just goes deeper in depth, and that's kind of the high point. Now, once we figure this out, once we see this, what we're able to now do is we create that meal plan based upon your DNA. We have all this information, we have all this data, but now what we're able to do, and this is what I'll send you after, is we have 45 recipes that are now genetically predisposed to you that are going to decrease inflammation in the body and ultimately enhance what you're doing. So we've got our Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday meals already planned. Does this mean what you have to eat is what's here you have to eat? No, not at all. But you might be like, hey, Justin, I want to make golden berry chia pudding 5 days a week, and I want to have my spinach bell pepper omelet on Saturday morning and my strawberry chocolate smoothie on Sunday. Perfect. That's great. But you now have choices as to what you're going to engage in. And then people are like, okay, great. Well, I see this. What are my recipes and ingredients? No problem. We got them. Here's your ingredients list. Here's your instructions on how to do it. Great. I love it. And then from there, okay, well, now how do I do this in terms of my grocery shopping list? Well, no fear. We have your entire grocery shopping list right here for each day, for each week, however you want to do it. And then ultimately from there, the purpose of this is to decrease the inflammation within the body, within the gut, to ultimately come back to this level of homeostasis that we're seeking. And again, increases that HRV, increases your resiliency, increases your ability to perform. And at the end of the day, increases your capacity to handle more. So that's really how this thing all comes together, and the power of it.
I love it. No, I as I've alluded to throughout this, just love being able to have numbers and data to back up what truly works and what works for me specifically. That's the biggest piece here is I think I've seen a lot of chatter here about talking about the commercialization of everything, our food industry, our health industry, the medical, everything. And you have to be so critical of where that information is coming from and why. And almost always it's to make somebody else profit. And you have to be mindful of that. That's the reality we live in. And this has given me a palette of what works for me as an individual in this world, rather than just blatantly listening to whatever I hear and then I'm changing into a new diet or new pill every 6 weeks because they had a good marketing campaign.
You're exactly right. And here's the downside: high performance, health, wellness, even within our eight controllables we've talked about, it's all been commoditized. It's all been commercialized. It's all been we've been sold this bill of goods that, hey, you do this, it's going to be your solution. You do this, it's going to be your solution. And that's what I even talked about here to start above, was people are now taking their DNA tests and building businesses off the back end of them. Do the DNA test, it's $400. Oh, and by the way, for $250 a month, we'll send you your customized vitamins that are going to solve all your problems every month. Well, that's not how it works, man. It's just not how it works. And that's why we need to be, so, like you said, you need to be so critical. You need to ask questions. You need to understand your data. You need to take it. And quite frankly, you need to own it. You need to own the data that you're looking at. You need to own what you're seeing. And ultimately, it's, if you are not monitoring, if you're not measuring, There is no way you can manage anything. If you have a business, I guarantee you know your EBITDA. Why? You're measuring so you can manage it. If you're putting money in the stock market, I guarantee you're looking at the Dow, the S&P. Why? Because you're ultimately managing it. You're measuring. If you have money in real estate, you know a house has a cost. Why? Why have real estate costs gone up 20% in the last month? Because now we're measuring it. And so ultimately we can manage. I'm not going to go and buy a house now unless I absolutely have to, because I'm going to be paying for the high of it. So we need to know what our body needs. We need to know how to function and how to operate. And that is why, with what we've done, we've been able to take a look at HRV as the sole energy metric, the ultimate determinant,
Yes.
a single thing that says, hey, how is your body handling the stress in which it's under? Is it over or under? And ultimately, that's what we are able to work with. And that becomes so powerful.
Love it. Love it so much. We ripped through this hour. So everybody that's been a part of this journey, I see some of us that have been here literally every episode. Thank you so much. A few that were just joining this episode 10 and were curious to find the prior episodes. We will have all of these available on Justin's YouTube, my YouTube. We'll also be making some highlight reels and some clips to sort of consolidate some of this information. But ultimately, Justin does this every damn day for high performing business executives, professional athletes. That's the world he comes from. So if this has been any interest or value to you at all, connect with Justin individually. Him and his wife, Elise, have been the stars of this journey that we shared over the weeks. So all of the prior episodes of this journey will be shared. But if you'd like to start your own journey, please check out justownit.co. That's where I think the adventure of all of this can start for your own version. Justin, I have to drop just a sincere thank you. This has been an amazing experience to just feel more and more in my lane every week that we continued this. It just feels physically and mentally like I'm just at another level, and I have the business and life results to prove it as well. So thank you. And is there any sort of overarching macro level advice or messages you want to share here with people that have been with us the entire time, or that are just now stumbling into this and in the season finale?
I think it just comes back to this. I think it comes back to what we measure, we can manage. And when you manage, it ultimately changes your life. And if we can get back to what our body needs, acting off of our body, becoming engaged and awoke to a lot of the things that we've been numb to, it's going to transcend the way that we can optimize and show up in every facet of our life. And ultimately, the primary response is going to be energy.
Yes. Love it. No, and I've enjoyed so much mastering this energy equation that you guys put forward, because it's ultimately, as so many people here are, I'm certainly sure aware of, judging by the level of education people have here in the chat, and the worlds they're coming from, they are all validating that this is something that we need to focus on as humans, and there's only so much we can do as groups and communities, but ultimately it's that self-awareness and that measurement of what works for you as an individual. So this has been amazing.
100%. And that's, why we've put together the inner and outer energy component. And over the course of 3 years that we've really kind of manifested the science and the art of it together, it's it's grown into a 25-person team that we've got where it's global, and the impacts, like I'm careful to say this, but like we just talked about it today. We have 14 individual clients that have gone off certain hormone therapies, that have gone off insulin, that have gone off certain supplementation routines that were costing upwards of $5,000 a month. Like we're talking about, like we're talking about some serious confusion and some serious changes in lives that when you get to this level and you start and this isn't for your professional athlete or your high-end CEO only. It's for if you want to start to just change the way that you feel on a day-to-day basis and you're serious about it, then it's a no-brainer to start and dip your toe in and get something to get started on and get moving in that right direction.
Love it. Love it. Thank you guys so much for joining and being a part of it. As we've alluded to, if any portion of this has been valuable to you and you want to get started on your journey with their community and all of the assets, they just have an absolutely loaded arsenal of assets and resources to tap into. Please connect with Justin on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, head to the website here on the screen. And that, I think, officially does it. I'm a little sad, but this was also an amazing and a brilliant experience to shift the trajectory of what I think I can do and what I've been able to do in a day-to-day basis with the same exact 24 hours that I had before I started this journey. And they just feel so much more valuable every time I'm able to get that cycle and that habit just one more level aligned. So if you guys are looking to level up and tune into that higher frequency and optimize your energy equation, please do pursue this adventure. That was pretty much what we went through here week to week, and you'll have it even more personalized to your world. So, ladies and gentlemen, that does it. We are wrapping up the final episode of Build a Beast. Thank you guys so much and take care. We'll catch you out there on LinkedIn, all the other platforms. Connect with us. And thank you again, Justin. Thank you. And everybody that joined us, thank you as well. We are out of here. Peace.